tight budgets to the pandemic to supply and manpower shortages, in recent years, those responsible for their organization's security and safety have been put through a gauntlet of challenges. In this podcast, managers from 3 customer markets deliver keen insights in SSI's 2022 Security End User Forum. Be sure to also check out the companion feature in SSI September issue titled Security Directors Call for Action.
Be sure to subscribe to SSI's YouTube channel. Hit the like button, share, and leave comments. Or subscribe to SSI's Security Speaking podcast on Apple and Spotify. And leave us a review. Thank you. We're here with the SSI Security End User Forum 2022. And I'm fortunate to have 2 gentlemen with me today with varied backgrounds and from different markets, from healthcare and from higher ed. So if each of you could kind of take a moment to introduce yourselves and give us a little brief background, and also tell us about the organization that you're associated with. So let's jump in first with Anthony.
Hi, thank you. I'm Anthony Pleretti. I'm the Executive Director of Campus Safety at Widener University in the greater Philadelphia region. We're located in Chester, have campuses, law school campuses in Harrisburg and in Delaware. And so I oversee an organization of approximately 75 officers, have all varying levels of technology in our repertoire. And yeah, so I oversee all aspects of campus safety inside of the organization, and then also work with law enforcement and other constituents, both internally and externally, on technology needs.
Very good. Paul?
Good afternoon, Paul Sarnes. I'm the Assistant Vice President for Safety, Security, and Emergency Management for Virtual Health. Virtual Health is one of the largest healthcare providers in southern New Jersey. We have several acute care facilities and multiple primary care and urgent care locations throughout the state. We have about 15,000 employees throughout the organization, and I oversee multiple programs, so the safety program. So I oversee kind of like safe patient handling, some of our employee health and safety, security. We got a pretty big force. We got about 275 officers throughout the organization, and I oversee all the systems that support them, access control and so forth, surveillance systems. And then from an emergency management perspective, I oversee our emergency management program. I'm blessed to work with some great emergency management coordinators. But I also see things like our drug diversion program, our workplace violence program, and some other things that tie quite nicely into what we do in our profession. So I've been here 22 years now, and couldn't dream of doing anything else.
And what might be an example of a couple of the most common incidents that you're looking to try to prevent?
So in Chester, there's a higher crime rate when it comes to aggravated assault, shootings, homicides, and things like that. So obviously, those are the types of things that we're trying to prevent from occurring on and around the institution. Given the institution's unique geographic location, right there, the challenge is a little bit closer to the campus borders than we would obviously like, but it's about a strong partnership with the community and the law enforcement agencies in the area to kind of reinforce the perimeter of the campus and ensure the stuff doesn't occur. We're also on the same major road that leads to the local hospital, and so we will see sometimes incidents that happen off campus that end up coming onto campus only because people are on their way to the hospital and for some reason it stops and the emergency kind of lands at our doorstep.
We had Alan join us. Alan, welcome. To catch you up, if you could just introduce yourself and your title and your organization, and then go from that into just sharing with us your top 3 or 5 organizational security safety challenges.
First off, let me apologize for being late. It's our second day of school, so many fires I was trying to put out. My name is Al Kane. I'm the security director for Gilbert Public Schools in Gilbert, Arizona. And a little about my background. I was a Chicago policeman for 25 years, and then policeman for 3 years here in Arizona, in a couple different departments. Ran security for Edward Jones Financial for a little bit, and then I've been here with the school district for a little over 4 years now.
If I could ask each of you, how satisfied overall are you with your system solutions at present, And what might be 2 or 3 like wish lists in terms of functionality? So I'll just circle back to Anthony for that one.
So I think you can only be as satisfied as the system you inherited, recognizing what you inherited, right? And then how likely or how willing, right, the company is that you work with to get it to the ideal state, right? All of us, I think, know where we started and have been working on a plan to get where we envision an ideal state to be. A lot of what Alan is talking about is what I inherited at Widener when I started. And so, kind of a hodgepodge of cameras all over the place, serving no purpose, not doing what they're supposed to be doing. Quality wasn't good enough to see anything other than watch the crime happen, but not identify anything. And none of that helps, right? I think the biggest thing that sometimes people forget in this field is that technology is supposed to solve a problem for you, right? Technology is supposed to be a person or a replacement of a person in that physical location. It's supposed to be a force multiplier. And a lot of the times, right, technology is not what it needs to be, only because we're putting in solutions that don't really achieve the solution that we need it to be. And so for me, the biggest thing is having a technology integrator that understands that, hey, we're putting in a piece of technology here because we have a problem. And so it's explaining to that integrator, this is what the problem is. I want to make sure that they fully understand it and that the solutions and resolutions that they're bringing forward actually achieve the solution of that problem. And could they as well offer some type of auxiliary services for being in that location? So putting in a card reader at the entrance of a building is great. We need that door to be locked, but we still need to have different access rights to it. And then, hey, an auxiliary benefit of that is when the door is ever propped or if the door is ever forced open for any way, shape, or form, we now know, right, because we get an alarm. So that's the kind of solutions that we look for going forward. I think the biggest thing that I would want to see, from all of this, and I think all of us agree, is that, my dispatchers have to work across 7 different solutions right now, 7 different softwares, 7 different systems, right? And so integration of all of them into one is obviously very difficult. There's some companies that are willing to find ways to integrate with others, and some companies that are just like, nah, this is our system, this is what you get. We don't really do anything with anyone. And I've been, as an administrator, trying to shy away from those companies. I want companies that want to work together, that want to develop a solution where they all play into each other, whether they have, whether they're under the same umbrella or not. And I think that's something that a lot of people in our realm are really looking for, is how do we integrate better and how do we make sure that the solutions that we're putting in place are actually solving the problems that we have.
Paul, do you identify with those pain points or do you have some?
No, absolutely. Any new systems that we put in, obviously we're going out for bid and we're putting our list of requirements and must-haves and what would nice to be have before we make a decision. So I'm incredibly satisfied with everything that we've installed over the 22 years I've been here. But as we've acquired other organizations and as we acquired physician practices or other types of services, and you're inheriting that legacy equipment. And a lot of it that we inherited was proprietary. So you're kind of stuck dealing with certain vendors and certain integrators. And I try to shy away from that. And even with our let's talk about our video management system and our cameras, I've never been one to say, okay, I'm going to put out this whole product line is going to go in. I try to pick the best solution for the best application. So it could be this vendor has the best PTC, but this vendor has the best 360. And this vendor has the best artificial intelligence. So, I'm a big fan of anything with open architecture, and that could be interfaced and connected to the best in breed product at the time. So satisfied with everything we've put in. But, when it comes to what you inherit in the legacy stuff, certainly there's always opportunity for improvement. We've been blessed. I've worked with the same integrator for the last 20 years. So we deal with a company called CM3 right here in Pennsylvania, and they know our culture. They have a great relationship with our IT folks, and we all know we can't do anything without IT, right? So that relationship and understanding how the culture works and how we cable and how we install things, I think, is incredibly important.
Alan, what about you in terms of what are a couple of functionalities or capabilities that you'd really like to see come to fruition through those systems?
Could I just say what they said? Because I mean, Anthony and Paul stole my thunder, because that's they, like they both said, most of these systems are what I inherited, and many are very proprietary. And I think Anthony said it. I wish all these systems, these different vendors, would get together and make them all work together, but it's just not like that. So the only true systems that I have put in place myself are the Vigilon camera system and the Raptor system, which are two totally different worlds. But we are looking forward. We're going forward with the RFP for the card access, and that is one of my demands, is that it integrates with our camera system so that we can use the same VMS to see who's at the doors and release doors and such through that same software. So, unlike them, I didn't have a ton to work with because it just wasn't in place. But now that we have a dedicated enterprise camera system, I'm demanding that the systems we put in following this integrate with them. And one thing I'll say, and I don't know if this is the point in the question, but I think Paul said it, is you have to have a great relationship with your IT department. And but prior to this project with these cameras, I mean, I knew everybody in IT, but I didn't work with them that much. But since we started this camera project, I mean, we are in each other's offices on a daily basis. You have to have that relationship with your own IT department, or it's not going to work. It's absolutely not going to work. And another point would be, no matter what system you use, I think you always have to concentrate on the end user, because some of these systems are put in place for, I'm going to use this word and it's not meant to be demeaning, but a tech geek, and some of these end users are just lay people that, the system cannot be so robust that it's not user friendly. And I think that's a big one, because some of the systems I've had in place, again, that were legacy to me, they're not easy to use. And, and the training is not there. And everything I've learned has been self-taught, quite honestly. And I couldn't imagine and I consider myself to be somewhat technological, but some of the lay people that work our front offices at the schools, if I had to train some of them on some of these systems, it'd be never ending. So I think ease of use is super important.
Great point. Usability. Yeah. How would you say, when you look at these solutions, are you looking more to deter, to apprehend, to prevent? What are the goals in terms of those? Let's keep with Alan on that.
Well, I think everybody's goal is to deter, be proactive, prevention, of course. In the school district, the schools themselves using the cameras, they don't have the time nor the manpower to be actively, let's stick with the cameras. They don't have the time nor the manpower to be actively monitoring for everything. At our largest high school, we ended up putting in like 89 cameras with multiple heads in them. So they've got, one of them has over, 200 different views. And it's not humanly possible to monitor all of it at one time. So they have their trouble areas into a specific view. The big thing for us is being proactive as possible, and then using archived footage when needed for either criminal or discipline.
Anthony or Paul, do you want to comment on that? If not, I'll move on.
Yeah, by all means, Paul.
I can jump in. So the 4 Ds, right? We want to deter, deny, delay, detect. I think we all would say we want to deter the behavior before anything occurs. So I'm a big fan of, like, I use a lot of public view monitors at every one of our entrances coming into our facilities. I think they just set the tone. Like when you walk into a retail place, we started experimenting with them probably about literally 15 years ago. We've seen nothing but the benefit of them. So for me, it's all about deterrence, and that through signage and through directives and through the public view monitors, I think we achieve that to some degree. But certainly when bad things happen, we want to be able to detect that. We want to be able to have some good data that we can investigate and learn from. And if it's something criminal or something that we need to prosecute, we want to have good quality images, good quality data that we could go forward with. But I think that the goal of security practitioners is to deter crime through, most of us live by the philosophy of crime prevention through environmental design. And then that's what, you design your facilities and your campuses so that it's preventing as much crime from occurring as all possible.
Yeah, the number one thing that I think both have brought up, right, is that we always try to deter. We have tons of science that backs, right, the methods in which we deter and how well they are effective. And then obviously we all want the ability to go back and review footage and identify individuals so that we can solve those crimes if they do happen. But I think the more crucial step where I'm expecting or wanting to see that the biggest technological innovation is in detection. Because detection is currently, right, for most places, detection is based on manpower, right? Detection is based on an individual who actively is seeing or catches something that occurs. And so that's obviously the biggest gap that I think all security directors would want to see an improvement in, and I think the industry is starting to respond with that with AI, right? In order for this to be a true force multiplier and really expand the reach of campus safety or other security departments, is we have to have eyes everywhere, and we do, but they're not smart enough to tell us when something is actively happening. And so I've been most excited, I think, in the field to see AI that recognizes certain physical movements, certain mannerisms, right? Automatic weapon detection, automatic crime detection, geofencing for trespassing. All of that kind of stuff is what I really think the industry should continue to expand on even more so, because that's the next biggest area, right? If you look at the 4Ds and you look at what we do, right? Deterrence is probably what I think the system does best, for those who are actively paying attention, though, of stuff that's in the area, because not all criminals pay attention to what's in the area, right? But then deterrence, I think, it could be as equal, right? And if the system really detected as well as it deterred, I mean, we would be able to catch people right in the act and only reinforce, right, the kind of crime prevention stuff that we're talking about.
And if I could just build on that, I couldn't agree with you more. I mean, just think of all the data that the systems provide us. Just think about an access control system and watching thousands of transactions pop off in front of you when people are, actively swiping through a card reader. That's great, but it means nothing. We don't care that everybody's accessing a door that they're supposed to. We want to know when a door is propped open, when there's an authorized use of a badge. That's the stuff that has to be filtered out. It has to be actionable. And just like Anthony said about the cameras, I mean, you can have 1,000 cameras in your command center. It means nothing because you're not looking at them all the time. We need the technology to say, this is where you need to focus your attention. And this camera at this time, right now, at this location. So that's where I'm really excited to see that technology just continue. If it's AI or if it's the interfacing of those systems, that's what I'm most excited to see in the future. We're getting there. I mean, we're certainly moving in the right direction.
Yeah, and Scott, if I could expand on that.
Mm-hmm.
So to give kind of a market example of the kind of things that we're talking about, right? So say that we are able to detect that there is someone, a visitor, right? Someone who just walked in off the street, who enters one of our buildings that's open to the public, right? And is just kind of acting suspiciously. They're loitering around. They're being found in multiple buildings without swiping in. Maybe they recognize that they're piggybacking off of other individuals through card access areas, right? A system that detects that this is an individual who's now been in a couple of places, who then shows all of the different video clips because it recognizes their face and it profiles that individual. And now we can see all the locations that that person's been. We can see all of the different card readers that that person maybe has swiped into or not swiped into. A system that presents data in an organized manner, kind of in the context in which a security professional will need it, is the solution that we're talking about, right? The biggest problem with us capturing all of this data is that none of it is digestible by just one individual. We'll spend hours, right, diving through reports after reports and video footage, looking for something or searching for something. But an AI, right, kind of overmind that recognizes, hey, I always like the idea of typing in a problem or just telling the system, I want to see this, and for it to intuitively know from a security perspective that this is what I'm looking for, and presenting all of that would be invaluable. I mean, it would be the billion-dollar answer, right, to what all of us have and are dealing with.
Yeah, it's exciting to think about that. I think it's coming. Paul, considering your tenure, you in particular, to what extent, if any, are you looking to security solutions to provide just organizational efficiencies, that might extend to how the facility is managed and that kind of thing that might not be strictly security or safety?
Absolutely. It's a great question. So real important. So, security is obviously we provide the service of keeping the campus safe and secure and fear, free of fear and interruption and so forth. But we also need to be a business partner. So, what first came to mind is utilizing cameras as part of our snow removal process. Years ago, we would put cameras. We put a system in that allowed us to monitor our cameras remotely from home on the network. So when it started to snow, I was able to use those cameras to call the maintenance. I was in charge of facilities at the time as well. So I was able to use the cameras for an operational. We've also used cameras to determine the peak times in our cafeterias. When do we need to throw that second cashier in the cafeteria? Because we can see based on the camera count that there's more volume in there. So, the cameras, especially with the AI technology, if it's counting people, if it's doing spaghetti diagrams, if it's, all those other operational components that the cameras or a technology can manage, we have to be part of the overall operation of the organization, right? So we need to use our equipment, our technology to do our base and our core functions of safety and security, but they should also support the organization as a whole. And I really think, the technology that's coming out is really going to help us do that, much more than it is today.
Well, IT's come up a lot, as it rightfully should. And do you feel that there's more of an emphasis on cyber physical security in your organizations? Do you feel like there's a suitable balance of those two things? I'll stick with Paul on that.
I think it's shifting. Alan hit it right on the head. I think it's shifting because of some of the recent events. Cyber is one of, especially in healthcare. If there was a survey that the American Hospital Association did, and they asked, all the CEOs, what is your number one threat? What's your number one risk? And certainly it was access and regulation, but it was cyber. I mean, there are healthcare organizations that had cyber attacks that closed, that will never open up again because of the financial impact. So I think up until recently, I would have said cyber number one, physical security, second, if not far down the line for some organizations. But with the recent incidents that occurred and the focus on workplace violence, I think that right now, especially in healthcare, expenditures for safety and security are higher than they ever have been, and rightfully so, because some of the incidents that have occurred and the threat and the vulnerabilities that we have in healthcare. And schools are the same thing. I mean, it's there are still a lot of open hospital campuses and college campuses and school campuses, and I think these recent events have made everybody say, security has to be a higher priority than it was yesterday. We have to. I just came back from doing active shooter training at an ambulatory surgical center, and they said to me, we would have never thought about doing this a year ago. It wasn't something they thought about until recent incidents. So I think at times we have to take advantage of the focus, what's happening in other places throughout the world, other industries, and really use that to focus our organization's attention on prioritizing safety and security.
Anthony, what about your organization in terms of the balance of physical and cyber?
So I think I don't think anyone can argue that physical is the more widely accepted. Physical is kind of what's always in everyone's forefront or mind, right? They're thinking about, locking doors and camera systems and all of that kind of stuff. And I think it's a lot easier to implement some type of physical security measure because it's more widely accepted nowadays. But I think cybersecurity is the single greatest threat to anyone right now. Paul mentioned that, right? When you think of it like this, right? So I think we've all worked very hard in our fields to teach our employees and our students not to prop doors because defeating the physical security, right, can create an issue. I think that we have this unbelievable challenge with our IT partners to teach people to stop clicking on links that have nothing to do with you and to identify that. Widener University, even just this past week, just got bombarded with all sorts of phishing attacks and malware attacks that found 40 accounts get compromised. And when you think about the scale of what this can do to an organization, a cybersecurity attack can be 10 times more powerful to destroying an organization than an active shooter can. You can recover from an active shooter, right? These schools that have had these things happen have not closed, right? Virginia Tech did not close, but the right cyber attack can close you. And so we always have to be conscientious of life and property and protect all of that. And physical security can, by no way, shape, or form, minimize. But we need to significantly throw a lot more assets into cybersecurity and education to the community about what that is. And I think that's a bigger challenge than we've ever had, only because physical security across all generations in the past 100 years, anyone can understand why it's important to lock your door. In the past 100 years, technology savviness, right, is harder to come by. And across that same 100, years and generations of people, there are all sorts of varying levels of technology comfortability and understanding and intellect. And so now it's way easier, right, for criminals to get someone to compromise their access credentials, and they're getting really good at it. In the manner in which they're spamming and attacking. And we are so used to just scrolling to the bottom of the terms and clicking OK. We've gotten so used to just doing stuff quickly, technology-wise, that people compromise their security, and then if they're good ones, they realize that they did it after the fact. Preventing it is a gigantic hurdle that we're going to have to overcome because cybersecurity is growing. It is definitely not going anywhere.
Alan, you mentioned the shooting incidents. How do you feel about the gunshot detection solutions that are emerging? And do you think that that's going to be part of the overall answer?
Yeah. So as I first stated, I started my first career was with Chicago Police Department, and middle of my career, that technology came out, shot spotter technology. And we used it, and it was very prevalent on the police department. We have not employed any gunshot detection here at the school district. I'm not saying we would never do it, but right now we were just so far behind the 8 ball that I'm not even caught up to where we need to be first. But I do want to jump back on the last question to just follow up what Anthony said. Cybersecurity in the educational world is huge. We've had local school districts here in northern Arizona almost had to close down because of ransom attacks. So I think, although physical security is my forte, I guess, and I'm not the IT guy, we have to work very closely because the security products that I implement are on our network. So they could very well be hijacked through this malware and ransomware too. So I think any organization, when doing these integrations, has to have a strong working relationship with your IT department, because sometimes we have to open up these firewalls to get systems in place, but we got to make sure they're put back into place. So I think you need a really good relationship with your IT department. Sorry to double back on the question.
No worries. And part of that too, I would think, is that when you're looking for or dealing with your integrator, you want to make sure that they have a decent level of IT knowledge and are comfortable in a network environment, so they're also aware of potential cybersecurity vulnerabilities related to the networked physical security.
Absolutely. That goes back to what we said about the trust and the honesty and doing your due diligence when you do that RFP process, to finding out that they hopefully have that and have the trust in them that they do.
And if I could just add anything, I think that's something that we as customers need to require when we're interviewing an integrator. I think we need to bring our security IT expert to the table and have them talk to the integrator, because if they're not talking the same language and the integrator doesn't have somebody who's well-versed at cyber, that's scary to me, because I don't want my integrator introducing a camera that could take my network down or could make us vulnerable in any way. So, both Alan and Tony said the same thing. You have to have this relationship with physical security and IT security, because we want to never be part of creating a vulnerability, for our own organizations.
And Scott, if we go back to gunshot detection, right, I think it's important for everyone to understand as they start to get up to the level of implementing those technologies, that technology, I think, is a stopgap right now. I don't think it is a solution. I think it is something that helps us increase our response time marginally. And ideally, right, because we're skipping the detection phase, or we're skipping the deterrence phase and going straight to detection, which is important, right? We want to be able to detect them and respond quickly to those. But even at the Campus Safety Conference East that Paul and I were at, Paul, I don't know if you saw it, but Rad Technologies had this AI screen that you would post in your parking lot, and then that obviously observes an individual with an open and displayed firearm approaching your building. It starts flashing bright and red, uses a 100 decibel speaker that starts yelling at the individual that, a firearm was detected and that law enforcement are on their way, and that's a true deterrence from that individual ever approaching the building. At the point in which we look at Texas and that individual is approaching the building with an open firearm in full display, right? The security access control at the front of that building did not stop that individual. They shot out the glass and walked around it, right? The gunshot detection system in the school did not stop that individual from approaching that school. If anything, it responded, right? If they had one, it would have responded just as quickly as a phone call would have responded to something like that. But a system like what Rad was showing us, right, where it's now alerting that person before they get anywhere near the building, hey, you've already been detected, people are already responding, that person might not go in that school now, because they know that their timer has already started before they've wanted it to. And catching some people by surprise, I think, in those realms is 10 times more beneficial. So I always caution people, I would never implement a gunshot detection system on our campus because of that reason. And I think that we really should be looking towards like what Rad is trying to do. And I'm sure there's a host of vendors that do it. I just mentioned them because I saw them. Mm-hmm. But yeah, I think that is ultimately the thing that we need to be looking at. And I that's what I challenge our integrators to is, don't bring me gunshot detection. Because from a customer-centric standpoint, think about what that's actually going to do to solve the problem. What Rad is bringing to the market, I think, is way more viable to actually solve the problem. And I caution institutions to think about that. There might be some scenarios where gunshot detection systems are really important. At our institution, I've not seen a need for it. I need something like what Rad is providing.
Yeah. And I couldn't agree more. I mean, what we really need is something on the edge, something in the analytics in the camera, something out in the edge that's going to detect a weapon. And then, for lack of a better word, and be the trigger to then lock down the doors, to then be the trigger to send out the mass notification, to notify security. The detection is way after the fact. The damage is already done at that point. We need to prevent it from coming into our facilities.